Welcome to EventNewsDXB. Before we begin, I've got a quick favour to ask. There's one simple way that you can support our show, and that's by hitting that follow or subscribe button on the app you're listening to the show on right now. It really does make a huge difference in helping us get the show out there to as many people as possible. So please give us a hand and click that button right now. Thanks a bunch.
EventNewsDXB.
You're listening to the EventNewsDXB podcast, your behind-the-scenes look into the world of events in Dubai, the UAE and the MENA region. I'm Ian Carless, and each week I'll bring you the latest news, industry trends and insider stories shaping one of the world's most dynamic event markets. From professional insights to Dubai's most inspiring success stories, we've got everything you need to stay ahead in the ever-evolving event industry. So whether you're an event planner, a brand manager, or just someone who's passionate about the power of events, you're in the right place. This week, we're talking to one of the most vocal members of the Dubai event industry, Dan Bolton. After starting out life as a circus artist, including a stint as a fire breather, he quickly recast himself in the role of event producer. A move to Dubai saw him cut his teeth with a leading model and event agency before forming his own company, Dan Bolton Creative Management Agency. Following a whirlwind period of huge growth, 2023 was sadly the year that things came to an abrupt halt, leaving Dan having to start again from scratch. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're actually no stranger to podcasts, are you? You and Lily have one, don't you?
We've got one which is a little bit on pause right now, which maybe we'll talk about.
Okay.
But I'm having like a real bad sense of deja vu. It's like life has just come full circle in so many ways because we started doing our podcast during COVID with you.
We did.
You were helping us put it all together and there was nothing else for us to do. We were all a little bit bored.
Yeah, exactly. I think you and I were like everybody else in the event industry, weren't we? We were all twiddling our thumbs for 18 months.
Scrambling, trying to figure out how to survive.
Yeah.
But I'm loving the new set.
Thank you.
It has like the nostalgia of the old one with a bit more space and a few more decorative items.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we decided to lean into it a bit more in 2025.
I like it. But yes, I'm no stranger to podcasts. But I'm feeling a bit rusty. It's been a while.
I shouldn't worry about it. But okay, let's rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you get into events and how did you end up in Dubai? I know at one point you were a fire eater.
Yeah, that's for sure. So how did I get into events? So it's a very long story. The short version is I had friends that were professional dancers. I looked at them and was like, wow, I think like this is amazing.
Yeah.
I'd also just come back from a trip to Australia.
Yeah.
I was a spectator for the opening ceremony at the Sydney Olympics. And I was like, damn, this is amazing. Like just the whole spectacle of everything. So I came back to the UK. I joined a circus school. I became a circus performer, stilt walker, fire breather, clown, pretty much, stick me in a costume. I'll be that idiot to do whatever. The fire breathing, I'm still struggling with my asthma right now.
Most people just do the fire breathing with a couple of tequilas in the bar.
I mean, I've done that. I tried that before. Like, I've set myself on fire. And then of course, then your parents go like, what the hell are you doing with your life? That was not what we planned for you. But then I started to book talent, manage talent. I grew within the agency that I was with at the time, did all the business development. I was really successful, did some incredible projects. And then an opportunity happened where my partner at the time was like, we're moving to Dubai. And I was like, maybe not. Made the decision to. At that time, Dubai was very different. We're talking like 2007. So it's not the city we have now. It's obviously the foundations of where we are today. But I was expecting this whole like Vegas without the gambling, like this whole, big industry of events and entertainment. And it was fairly primitive back then. It wasn't kind of like where we are today, where we've had like these mega events like the Expo, etc., or the World Cup over in Qatar.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like from the grassroots in many ways. Like, you step off that plane and you're like, I'm here. And it's like, oh, there's a lot of stuff to be done. But it's been great building.
Now, you cut your teeth, am I right, with bareface? You were originally with bareface?
That's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
So I remember talking to them whilst I was in the UK, and they were like, as soon as you land, come see us because we're getting more requests for entertainment. We don't have anybody. They're a model agency. Landed, went to see them. They were like, we need you tomorrow. So I literally jumped into a job immediately, which was very fortunate. And I had a great time with them. It was 8 years of fashion, excess, party, models, like Amazing.
That's a good stint, isn't it? 8 years.
8 years I was with them, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm guessing, like many people who work for companies, at some point you kind of thought, okay, the grass might be a little bit greener on the other side. Maybe it's time to start something of my own. Which you did.
I did, actually. Yeah, so I left them, I want to say 2015, thereabouts.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I think I'd resigned 15 times. The company at the time, their company, not mine, was growing significantly. They'd had a whole merger, restructure, and like the opportunities were incredible. And it just felt prohibitive. And it gets to a point where you're like, you know what? I'm not enjoying it anymore.
How was the transition then? How difficult was it for you to leave the safety net of working for somebody full time and that regular paycheck, and then setting up your own business?
It wasn't challenging in terms of clients. I was very fortunate. I didn't steal clients, but clients came with me. So I had a business pretty much immediately. I think as a business owner, you actually have less freedoms than being an employee, because with an employee, there's a certain level of safety. You're protected from some of the kind of serious responsibility. Obviously, you've got KPIs or you've got your job role, whatever, but you're protected from a lot of that, because that's the owner's problem. When you become the owner, it's all your problem. And I've learned that definitely.
Yeah. Now fast forward to 2024.
Yeah.
And moving into 2025, I think the issues that you've had over the last sort of 12 to 18 months are very well documented by your own volition.
Yeah.
So maybe you can speak to us a little bit like that. I mean, obviously, I think from many people looking from the outside, you grew at a tremendous pace. And that in itself brings its own set of difficulties. How do you scale a business so quickly? And it's especially in a market like Dubai, which is very transient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So talk to us about your most recent journey.
Well, clearly you don't scale it the way I was scaling it, because that didn't work out. And I'm laughing about it now. It comes with
hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
And it's like, I'm not laughing because it's funny, because trust me, it's not been.
No,
it's more of a case of a coping mechanism, because it's been tough, like really tough.
Yeah.
So we grew exponentially, which is incredible, and I have to recognize my own efforts in that. I have massive self-doubt, imposter syndrome. We've talked about it on podcasts previously.
Yeah.
But the fact is, we deliver good work, essentially. Is it the best? Could we do better? Of course we can. But we delivered incredible projects, and we were continuously growing at a rate which was bonkers in so many ways. It was just adding layers and layers of complexity on top of everything. And then comes risk. So yes, we just couldn't keep up with the pace. And I was kind of, when I look at it kind of like, what's it called? Retrospectively, there we go. I was like, the copy was strong. You really start to analyze, like, what went wrong. And realistically, we didn't have the solid foundation at the beginning, and it couldn't keep up with that pace. And there wasn't the planning for what happens when something goes wrong, because we're growing, we've got amazing projects. Like, what could go wrong? There was a level of naivety or just inexperience, if I'm honest, from myself and others of what to do for a rainy day, because this is Dubai. We don't have rainy days. It's everything's this, land of opportunity. Whereas the reality is, like, something bad happens, you get bit on the ass, and then you're like, okay, that wasn't what I was thinking. How do I fix it?
And that is the reality, isn't it? I mean, we can all look at Instagram and think it's sunny every day and the streets are paved with gold. But at the end of the day, we have the same, we work in the same environment as everybody else does pretty much around the world. We have the same, that we face many of the same issues, many of the same problems. Things came to a head for you, didn't they? I don't know how much detail you want to go into, perhaps not as much, but you certainly had one project that really tripped you up.
Do you know what? When I look back at it, it's like a perfect storm, and it could have gone either way. And this is the thing. It's like, in business, like we're successful because we make risks. We make calculated risks. None of it's kind of done flippantly. I don't think I really understood the ramifications of what if it would go wrong, but there was nothing to say that it would go wrong up until that point. So where are we? We're in like summer 2023. Oh my God, like nearly 2 years ago now. And we just pitched for a big project, Qatar, huge. It's like the biggest project we've ever done. And like every project, there's a conversation that happens in the background. This is what the client's looking for. It was very much like, this is yours to lose, essentially. Because we'd gone down the pitching process, we'd had the conversations, etc. We invested so much money into that pitch. We're talking like hundreds of thousands of dirhams, because there's a very the high likelihood of a very positive outcome at the end of it. So this is summer. And for most people that know the region, you know, your cash flow starts to dry up very quickly from Ramadan onwards.
And cash flow is a perennial problem for everyone, isn't it?
It's hard here because people pay late. I mean, I'm responsible for that currently right now, which is obviously making some people's lives hell. So we were kind of like juggling. So you've got yes, we have this project, which was contracted. We were awarded and won it a little bit further down the line.
Yeah.
So we started to invest in resource, infrastructure, training, additional people, like all of the things we needed to deliver that project. The project is awarded really late. We had 6 months of programming to complete in literally 6 weeks. So like we've got like a contract, we're moving, we relocated people to Qatar, like we're throwing the kitchen sink, like everything, because this is the biggest project we've ever won. And we're talking like 100 million dirhams worth of business.
Yeah.
So like I'm throwing everything at it, everything's moving. And of course, there's hiccups, you know, there's delays on contracts, there's delays on, you know, procurement, awarding, whatever. We go through this, Oliver, especially in this region. And a lot of it, you just keep moving further forward because time is of the essence. You got 6 weeks here. So anyway, we threw everything at it. Long story short, we were the ones leading much of this project with our local partner in Qatar. And then all of a sudden it was like local partner in Qatar got very much louder in the conversation because they were very silent before.
Right.
And once we'd won it, and then very much it was like, oh, it's a whole new team of people. This is a new direction. This is a new contract agreement. The budget you had has been halved. Like all of these conversations. And we're like, what the hell just happened? Like it came kind of out of nowhere. And essentially we got pushed out of the project.
Yeah.
We'd invested all this money. We'd invested everything. We took our eye off the ball for the rest of Q4 because I've got a 100 million dirham project. Like I can't do anything else. And yeah, we were essentially pushed out. I got nothing, not one single dirham. So then all of a sudden you're like, well, where's my pipeline? Where's my cash flow? And, you know, a lot of people have said, oh, well, you were kind of foolish to do that. I'm like, but if you speak to anyone in business, you know, we had contracts again, we had lawyers, like people were looking at things.
Yeah.
I think people take calculated risk because the flip side of that risk, it went horribly wrong. But on the flip side of it, it could have gone incredibly well.
Yeah.
And that would have catapulted us then to a different level.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a level of naivety, I think, and just, learning.
And the restructuring, I mean, that's clearly a painful process. And there's two parts to this.
It's very painful.
Yeah, there's two parts to this. How have you managed that process? And then secondly, you've been very vocal about the whole transition and the whole process. I mean, clearly there's been some painful decisions.
Oh, geez, painful decision from day one. I think in hindsight, again, wonderful thing. I'm definitely going to write a book on it one day. It's been tough. Like really tough, because the challenge I had in the first place is I filled my business full of friends. So these are people which are like, I've known for 20 years and everything else. And then all of a sudden that dynamic shifts because we're talking about money. We're talking about jobs, responsibility, families, people's medical bills, you know, people's personal problems, like all of the above.
Yeah.
So we had to make some difficult decisions in the beginning. We didn't lay anybody off. It was a conversation. If people wanted to leave, there was delays in payments and salaries, etc. Then it just kind of snowballed, if I'm completely honest, because that's where kind of like resentment, fear, like all of these human emotions set in. So then people have their own challenges to deal with, which then means that we all behave differently. So people that I thought were going to stick around didn't stick around. People I actually thought were going to leave have actually stayed. And it just shifted everything. But the problem from the beginning was I was always trying to chase. I was trying to keep up.
Yeah.
And when people say it feels like drowning, like that's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
Literally, because you're just like, what's happening today? And it was one thing after another.
Yeah.
And that's been the biggest learning.
I've had other guests on who've also, you know, myself included, I've had businesses fail in other markets. I mean, Dubai isn't very forgiving when it comes to being able to fail, is it? Do you think you would be able to manage the process differently if you were in a different environment in another country, for example? Because I mean, obviously in other markets, you know, bankruptcy is an option.
Yeah.
I know that there are...
It's an option here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there is an option here now, isn't there?
A lot of people recommended I do it. For me, I don't know if this is ego. I'm not sure yet. Maybe one day I'll figure it out. Look, I made it very clear. Like, I owe people money. Things are delayed and stuff like that. I don't want to go down that route because then legally, I don't have any responsibility to pay people back.
Correct.
I think I come from a very working class background in North Manchester. It's like, if, like my parents would not allow me to do that. However, what I will say is like, you said unforgiving. Fuck, man, the hate has been brutal. And this is the stuff that people don't necessarily see all of the time. Like, some of the conversation you have with people, you're just like, wow, that's very different from what I was expecting. And I get and I understand why. It just starts to get to a point where you go, this is just not worth it anymore. Like, on a personal capacity, fine. But then also for the people around you that it affects, like your team members, the new people that have come into our company, their families, my family, like so many different things, even the people which are kind of periphery to all of this, you just get to a point where you're just like, like bankruptcy would be the easy option.
Yeah.
Because then you can just like, whatever.
Absolutely.
You do whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
However, like, I don't want to go down that route. Yeah.
Do you think that amount of vitriol, do you think that contributed to your decision to be very vocal about the transition and the subsequent aftermath? I mean, you have been very, very, very open on LinkedIn, for example.
Of course, a lot of people say this to me. I mean, I had to be for many reasons. I mean, I was being blackmailed. That was one of them. I was getting WhatsApp messages from people saying, we're going to start a social media campaign and tell people that you're a scumbag and that you're scamming everybody. And then you sit there and think, right, okay, like, am I a scumbag? I mean, arguably, people can have an opinion on that, fine, whatever. Then you go like, did I scam people? And then you start to question choices, and you question yourself, and you question ability, and you question morals, and you question everything. And to be honest, like, you don't know what, because so many people say stuff. But then it just comes down to it's like, I never went out deliberately to do anything. Like, something happened. And on the flip side of this, as we all know, the other option would be to simply disappear and leave, which many people have done in the decades before us. And when it all kicked off, I remember people telling me, you should just do a runner.
Yeah.
And I was like, how am I going to do a runner? Like, I've lived in Dubai for 18 years.
Yeah.
My relationships are here. My friendships are here. Everything's here. So, like, what am I running from?
And then you really are burning the bridges because there's no coming back then.
Well, there's no coming back. Yeah, for sure. And I don't want to do that. Like, this will take time. It'll be very painful, but it will resolve itself eventually through my hard work and through other people's hard work. But yeah, the vitriol was brutal. And then my kind of comeback to that was after lots of therapy and discussions and breakdowns and everything else. It was like, I'm actually not a scumbag. Like, shit's happened. I really wish it didn't. I apologize for that. All I can do is make it better. Literally. So does that make me a scumbag to people now? Yes. Will that make me a scumbag in the future? No. Will people probably call me up and be like, hey, can I do a job for you in the future? Yes, you will. Like, this is just a cycle, which is a very painful one. But I will fix it and then we'll move on. Relationships will get fixed if they need to be fixed, and then we'll move into a different future.
What do you think let's pick three. What do you think were your three key learnings from the whole process?
Holy, wow. That's a good question.
I mean, I'll give you one. Cash flow.
Cash flow, like king. I work in a creative world. So for us, it's like money's a prohibitor to creativity. It's like we want to do things. Like we want to. And I had a team of people around me that were responsible for money. We're a business. We had 85 people. There was a structure, a board. There was all of these components. And I think the second part then to cash flow is like you've got all of these people with responsibility who've got ownership and accountability for certain things. And you as a business owner see a top level. You don't always see the detail. The reality is the book stops with you. And then when it all goes horribly wrong, those people quickly disappear. That was the second biggest learning. Because I remember one day looking round and being like, shit, you've all gone. And I was like, so who's going to pick up these pieces? And I was like, well, clearly me. And it was really interesting that it was from the senior team who went the quickest.
Right.
And you literally look and be like, oh, wow. So that's how it's going down.
You mentioned, hiring friends, and listen, a lot
That'll
of
be my
us,
third one. Never hire friends.
Yeah, a lot of us do that though, don't we? Because we like to think that, obviously you're not going to hire friends that that can't do the job.
Yeah.
But with friends, you would hope comes a certain level of trust, and that makes it easier in some cases for them to be a good hire. But as you found out in retrospect, perhaps that's probably not the best route.
No, hiring friends is definitely not the right route. Also, hiring out of desperation is not the right route. So hiring would be my number 3 in general. Business was growing so quickly. I actually hated my own business, hated it, really. And this is something which was in discussion in 2022. I was going through therapy. I was talking to people, and I had trust issues. I wasn't enjoying it. I had massive bouts of crippling anxiety that I kept hidden from so many people, because in many ways it actually made me function. I have high functioning anxiety. Yeah. And that was what was pushing me further forward. But it was also pushing me in a way that, again, was unsustainable. I wasn't looking after my health. I wasn't looking after my mental health at all. And then I was just hiring to make a problem disappear without actually fixing the problem. And it's like that. What's the anecdote of where you can put Band-Aids on a sinking ship kind of thing? It's it's going to sink eventually. Yeah. And I think that's what I was doing. I was just sticking plasters everywhere. And those plasters, in fairness, if that's the right word to use, were the people closest to me, friends. So it's I need this help. I need this help. I need, without actually looking at it and being who's the best person for the job? Protect that kind of, employee-employer relationship. Do I actually need these people? Is there a better way of doing it? Et cetera, which is where we get to now, which is more positive. We've gone through the process of restructuring everything. And then I have a team of 10 people doing better work than a team of 85 people. And that's no disrespect to the people that were there previously, but the foundations, the structure, my management, everything was not right. So now it's had to flip itself to get to a place where it's actually, this is the business I want.
Well, I think, just to put a positive spin on things, I think if you asked any successful entrepreneur, they would have had past failures.
Multiple.
And more importantly, that's where you learn the most.
Yes. Yeah. I've had this conversation with a few people in different industries because it's tough. No one likes to be a failure. Your ego kicks in. And especially in this day and age, nobody can be a failure because everything's so amazing on social media. I had a couple of really interesting conversations, and they told me stories, and I was like, shit. I was like, our stories are parallel in so many different ways, and they've gone on to be incredibly successful. Yeah. Definitely, I have learned the most, which in many ways I wish I didn't have to do that. But I think in a year's time, 2 years' time, when you look back, you'll be like, that was actually happened for a reason. That was an incredible period of time of learning.
Moving on, I think if you had to write a report card for where the industry's at right now, where would it be?
I don't know. Do you know what? I was actually thinking about this. It's interesting you asked that question because I was thinking about it over the last few days. Obviously, my perception of the industry is a little bit jaded right now. So I can only speak for myself, and I don't know if it's clouded by the judgment of the last few years and that process. I think the industry is very messy, really messy. And I'm just thinking because, we talked previously, a lot of the big projects are not necessarily happening anymore. I mean, there are big projects still, but it's just very different. Saudi is very competitive. So obviously a lot of stuff's happening in Saudi. A lot of people have gone to Saudi. A lot of stuff's happening there. But if we're talking from a UAE perspective, a lot of it, stuff's driven by procurement, that kind of race to the bottom for price. There's not necessarily, for the people that we often deal with, that understanding of creative and the kind of the cost associated to creative.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. We were chatting to Stefan Weiland from and his sort of comments on a similar question were that no, we're not at the same place where we were pre-COVID, and a lot of that is to do with creativity. A lot of that is to do with budget. I mean, you touched on it. A lot of it is now procurement driven and budget driven. Yeah. And for many people, whilst there seem to be a lot smaller events, they're just cookie cutter. They're like, we've got a launch, the CEO will come and speak, and then everybody go to the bar. Yeah. But where's the story? Where's the spectacle?
The narrative.
Where's the narrative? Which is, of course, what events are all about.
Correct. But clients still want that. They just don't want it the way that it's actually deliverable in many, many ways. Because we always get that, tell us a narrative, take us through the journey. And then eventually you get to a point of like, well, I need some branded directional signage. I need a couple of activations, a speaker on stage and some F&B. And you're like, okay, but that's not the story. That's not the narrative.
It's a vicious circle though, isn't it? Because then when you omit the narrative, you're compromising the experience.
Yeah.
And then people go away, they go to events, they come out of the event having not had such a good time as they could have. And then the clients in turn don't get the results that they're looking for.
Yeah.
And therefore, when it comes around to perhaps doing it again, then they kind of think, oh, well, I'll spend even less.
I'm going to blame procurement, unfortunately, because that's my experience with them. It's like, if I can sit down with a client or the end decision maker, the person whose event it is, which, finally we get there, we do have those conversations with them. Like, you can really understand what is important to you. What are you trying to do? What do you want to try to achieve? What's the human connection, the emotional connection, the story, the narrative? What is your objective for hosting this event? And, generally it's like making people come out feeling proud, making them understand something more, making them more productive, there's something tangible that this event is supposed to deliver. That doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be a conversation, and it has to be a conversation that is actually real and feasible, which means that, yes, you're going to have to pay for it. Maybe not as much as we originally talked about, but there's going to be a meeting point in the middle. That meeting point just currently, it just doesn't happen because it's like, oh, well, let's go with the cheapest option. But the cheapest option is not delivering what you need. And you're self-perpetuating this, just like you mentioned, this cycle of mediocrity, essentially.
Where do you see the industry moving in for the rest of the year, for the rest of 2025?
Oh, I'm not sure, actually. That's a very good question. I don't think I'm in the right position to answer it fully because I'm a little bit insular at the moment. I think I've got my blinkers on. I'm just trying to figure out myself and my business. I'll talk about my business. I think where we're going to be, restructure, solidify, get it to where it should be, get it to where it needs to be. So then we can grow in the future and we'll grow differently. That's 100% for sure. I think then if you look at that in terms of the wider industry, probably something similar. I'm hearing all sorts from different people about, the need to restructure, change, evolve, pivot, all of those kind of words. Obviously, people are thinking Saudi. Eventually that will kind of go through a similar journey to what I guess the UAE has gone through. So I think there's a lot of movement in the industry. What other stuff's happening? I mean, it's very difficult because you don't have, again, those big signature things. There's nothing in the calendar, really. We don't have a COP28. We don't have an expo. All of that has shifted to Saudi. So if you're looking kind of in the long term, obviously people are excited about Expo 2030. People are excited about the Football World Cup, rightly, to again come to this region. Incredible.
I don't want to touch on this too much, but how do you see Saudi evolving in terms of the event industry?
I think the dream and the vision is amazing. You look at it and it reminds me of the heyday of Dubai. When I first came here 2007 and you had the big kind of Dubai Land, Universal, all of these things are going to come. I think then look at where we are in 2015, 2025, 10 years behind. You've gone through that kind of 18, 20 year journey. And a lot of it never materialized, but other stuff did. Yeah. So I think the vision of Saudi will change. It will evolve. It will grow. The interesting thing about Saudi that I really, really like is that it is predominantly Saudis. It's not a heavily kind of international immigrant, expat, whatever you want to call them, demographic that come here to do business. It's very, very Saudi, which then means different ways of doing business, different relationships. The fact that we don't speak Arabic will be a prohibitor in the future.
Do you think that makes it more sustainable?
I think it does.
As an industry, but perhaps just not on the scale that they're at now?
Definitely not on the scale that they're at now, and it's a huge country. I think the fact that they've got primarily most of their population is kind of in that 35-year bracket or up to 35 age bracket, the possibilities for the future are exciting. They're young, they're hungry, they're kind of open-minded, they're evolving. The pace of evolution and change is happening so quick. But again, it's like a gold rush. You've got everybody from around the world, which is now trying to take a piece of Saudi. I think the reality is Saudi's going to keep it for themselves. And they're going to start really thinking about, well, how do we protect this? How do we stop it being cannibalized by all of these internationals, which are essentially coming to do business to take the money out of the country? And I think, making sure that there's a level of knowledge sharing, transfer, building of infrastructure And I don't mean physical infrastructure. I mean creative infrastructure, tech infrastructure, like that type of thing. I think that's where it'd be very interesting.
That's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Before we close, I know you're a music fan. We've been asking everybody this. My vinyl collection has been growing over the last couple of years. What's on your playlist at the moment? What are you listening to?
What's on my playlist? Yeah. Wow. I'm going to say something now which is a little bit woo-woo. You're just going to be like, oh my God, here we go. But like a load of like soothing meditation stuff, like literally like Om Chants is something.
Okay.
Like, so literally like I'll plug in my iPod. Is it even a thing these days? Sorry.
You're dating yourself.
Wow. My God, I nearly said, what was the other one where you had like, was it
Walkman,
an iPod?
You're going to say Walkman next.
My cassette. No, like I've got this thing right now where I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning before the sun, it's like pitch black. I sit on the balcony with a coffee, I put in the music, and I kind of like set my intentions for the day. Like it's the thing to like sort my own mental health out and everything. But in terms of like actual artists, wow, that's a good question. Like my playlist is eclectic, like it's all over the place. Like if I'm completely honest, like my partner's constantly playing the soundtrack from Wicked. So I think I've got like Ariana Grande and like, what was the alphabet? I can't remember what she's called, Cynthia, on like repeat, like literally. So Defying Gravity is my number one at the moment. Yeah.
And finally, looking ahead at 2025, what are you looking forward to?
Resolution. Literally. I'm looking forward to being able to put certain things to bed, to move on, to continue to grow and be successful in a very different way. And I like the fact that, we've been talking about sustainability, and sustainability is not just like plants and animals, like sustainability in terms of how do we continue to move forward in life, from various different aspects. I think taking everything that I've gone through, taking everything that I've put people through, learning from all of that, and then moving into a different direction for the future, which would be it. For me, ultimately, peace. Like, I want peace. Like, I just want that kind of existence. I think, isn't that what we all want? You want to wake up in the morning, a little bit slower pace of life, no worries, no problems, excited. Like, that's for me, that's what 2025 is about. And then putting things to bed.
Dan, thanks for joining me.
Man, I've really enjoyed it. The coffee was strong, by the way, so it's like I've got straight in, like these subtitles for this one.
EventNewsDXB was presented by myself, Ian Carless. The studio engineer and editor was Roy DeMonte. The executive producer was myself and Joe Morrison. And this podcast is a co-production between Warehouse 4 and W4 Podcast Studio Dubai. And if you haven't done so already, please do click that follow or subscribe button. See you next time.
EventNewsDXB.